Here's everything you're going to need to install the shutoff, right down to the hammer and screwdriver and little drill bit, one combat plane and one Dr. Pepper. Locate the bell crank pivot pin and make a little X in the covering right on top and on the bottom. Take your hammer and a screwdriver, Allen wrench, locate the pivot pin and just tap it out. On this particular airplane, this has a smaller pin and there will be a small piece of brass tubing in the bell crank that you'll have to shake out, but it'll come out of there. Take your Sharpie, locate your hole where the pivot pin was, mark around where that's going to be. On the other side, mark where the pivot pin is and just mark out about a ½ inch. Take a piece of tape, normally be a clear square piece. I happen to have these keen little yellow ones that you'll never find, but put the tape around the spot that you just marked that you're going to cut. This gives reinforcement to the covering. Stick it down good. Take your knife and cut out that spot. Same thing on the top. Lay your base plate up on the airplane. Take you a regular drill or a hand drill in my case. Mark where all your bolts are going to go into the fuselage. Kill it. Alright, if your particular model has a smaller fuse, so I've found a lot of models have different width of fuselages here, of the center rib. If yours is so narrow that with the base plate set on there, and by the way you want to mount the base plate as far outboard as you can to give the most travel in this slot. But if your screws won't fit into your center rib because it's too narrow, because these go through this and into the center rib, if yours is too narrow, take this part, set it in a vise, take a punch and punch it here and here just enough that this screw will have to self-tap into the base plate. At that time you would mount this manifold. The screws would be at the bottom and you file the bottom of the screws off so it won't knock a hole in your covering. Take your pivot pin and hinge, look at it closely and make sure this is perpendicular. If it's not, bend it. It's that simple, because you want it to run through the upper slot of the base plate and move freely. So take one of the spacers, put it on there, stick it in the bell crank itself and through the top slot. Hold it in position, rotate the model over. Take your other spacer, mount it on top. Take your base plate, set it in position. Take your 2-inch screw and it goes right where your bell crank, original bell crank pin came out. It'll go right back in that hole and that will tie your safety wire to the complete mechanism. Alright, your bolt, that's the head of the bolt, runs through the original pivot pin on the inboard side of the slot of the base plate, runs through the fuse, self-taps into the hinge pin. You'll want to hot stuff this just to make sure it doesn't pivot. At the moment this doesn't pivot because it's tight enough, but Murphy's Law is it would move and it would affect your controls if it pivots in the air. So hot stuff that. Either put another small piece of tape around the slot that you've cut in the covering, or some people would put silicone in there just to keep that from tearing any further. When you get it done, you want to make sure that this moves extremely freely. At this time I take the foremost shutoff and I go ahead and mount in my rubber tube and mount it on the manifold just because it's easy to do while it's all there in your hand. Leave it in the bypass position That leaves the hose loose for adjustment later. Set it in the proper holes and screw it in. You'll want to take your push rod that was mounted on the outboard side and now move it to the inboard side. You'll have an angle there, but now that your bell crank is out some, that will give it the correct angle for the right control. Once you get the foremost mount shut-off mounted on top, you have a little lockout pin there. And of course, when you put it there, shut-off does not work whatsoever. So that's, you can start in that position, tune your needle in that position, whatever. Other than that, you can use this actually for the pinch off, which I choose to do. This is my pincher. Once I fuel the thing up, I fuel it on the needle valve side. I open it, fuel it, let it pinch off. I'm done. You'll bend this wire right there until it sits against this post. Now this one's got a little slack. Before I fly it, I'll probably have to put another little bend in the wire and take up all the slack. When the line tension gets on there, it doesn't take much at all. It's obvious it opens the wire and you get fuel flow. All of these kits come with the pivot pin rather tall. It's your choice. You can cut it down. You want to make sure it doesn't go over the pivot pin. I could cut about a ½ inch off that one if I chose to. The only problem I would see with that, you come in low and inverted, you could bend that. But they come long enough to do as you please with. So there it is. It's mounted up. It's simple. It doesn't take long to install and doesn't destroy your model. Good luck. Alright, to launch your airplane, you would start the plane, set your needle in the open position, let the pilot get to the handle, flip it over the lockout, and now you're actually holding the fuel open. As he takes off, you just hold it and launch. His line tension should hold that open. There's not normally a need for a lockout to hold the thing open to launch it. I have seen some people put a small screw in here or a small hook. It'll hook on there, the plane takes off, it'll go over it. That's your option. This kit does not come with that because I feel like that is an unsafe way to launch the airplane. I've been asked how to mount these on this type of airplane. The bell crank, actually push rod's on the inboard side. I took out the pivot pin, took a bicycle spoke, bent it 90 degrees. It just pivots through that push rod, through that center section. I run it up, put a piece of copper tubing on the outside to give it some space, and it works the same way as the others.